Hi there, this is Catherine with Unfolded Heart Music. Welcome back to Lyre Foundations. Today we're going to continue and complete Chapter 5, which is focused on improvisation and composition. Last time we talked about a number of different things to keep in mind, broadly speaking, and just getting you started on composition and improvisation. And today we're going to focus specifically on utilizing different keys, even though we are in one key signature. So we'll do a little bit of a summary, and then I'm going to give you an example, and I think we're going to go ahead and go through the practice as well on this one. So let's jump in and get started. Okay, so today we're going to be looking at pages 78, 79, and 80. And this focus for today, basically it's answering the question of how do I utilize the lyre to its fullest capacity, especially when it comes to it being a diatonic instrument. As we've talked about before, diatonic means that it's limited to one key signature. That means that I can set my lyre in only one key at a time. And that's because it's not a chromatic instrument, meaning it has all the sharps and all the flats, all the keys possible, all the tones or pitches possible. It doesn't have that, like, for example, a piano does. Nor does it have like a lever harp where you have different levers that you can push up and down to change a string and raise it or lower it depending on what what key you want to sort of switch into. Instead, we have to set our lyre from the get-go. For example, if I want to play in G major, I need to have all my Fs as an F sharp. And then I can't change it as I go through the piece, because then I'd have to, take out my tuning wrench and do it. And that's, of course, just a totally unreasonable thing to do. And so I think that this, among other things, is one reason why people perhaps see the lyre as a very limited instrument. And I want to sort of show the way in which we can really expand it in a way that maybe you hadn't considered before. So in order to do this, we're going to be using a lot of the music theory that we've learned before and applying it here, and really kind of expanding it. And I'm going to show some examples as well. So let's go ahead and jump in. We're going to mostly look at page 79. Let's do that first. I want to explain how this works, then we'll take a break. I'll give some examples, and then maybe we'll take another break and I'll walk through the practice a little bit so you understand how to utilize that. All right, so pages 78 and 79, the written part of this walk through in great detail what I'm going to explain here. I'm going to just jump to the visuals because I don't need to read all of that. And again, as always, please take a look at that and read those through. It will help you be able to just absorb and understand what it is that I'm trying to explain here, and make the video then even of more service to you. So looking at page 79, especially looking at the circle of fifths. So my lyre is set in C major. All right, so no sharps and no flats. This is how it's been set throughout this whole course. And so what we might think is, okay, well, that means I can only play in C major. I can't play in any other key, and I have to sort of remain circled around my C as my tonic note. So I have to play just in this area. And that's lovely, but if we have to stay there, it's kind of boring. And also, I'm not using a lot of strings, especially the strings down here. Let me make sure you can see me. Yep. All the strings down here, and there's just not a shift in the music in what I, as a listener, as I'm hearing. And so I want to show you how you can move around all over the lyre and utilize a bunch of different keys. So there's kind of two different ways to look at this. The first way is to understand that there are three major keys that you can use. And when I say major, I don't mean primary. I mean they're in the major. When we talked about major scales, it's in a major scale with those different intervals. So we've got C. It's very bright, very sort of very happy, and major keys tend to sound like that. So we have three of those. I'll articulate that in a moment. The other three keys that we have access to are three minor keys. The main one when we're in C major is what's called the relative minor. And the relative minor is a key that shares the same key signature. Now, we talked about this before, so if you're not quite sure about that, go back to chapter 4 and check that out. So with C major, A minor is our relative minor. You can see how even though I haven't changed any of the tuning on my lyre, it sounds very different. And so let me just play a little bit just within A minor. Again, I haven't changed anything on the lyre, and I can play all the notes within the A minor scale or key. Okay, so that's what my lyre is set to. So that is going to be my primary key. I can't really have another key as my primary key because this is the only key, the C major and the A minor, those are the only keys that I have complete access to every note, all 8 notes in that scale. And so let's look at sort of both of these images at the same time. We have the circle of fifths down below, and then we have this chart above. And so I'm going to be walking through the first example where we have no sharps or flats, and where the primary key is C major or A minor. Okay. The other 2 columns where it says 3 sharps, 2 flats, those are just 2 more examples of the same thing that I'm going to be walking through here. I'm not going to go through those because it'll be a little bit repetitive. It'll make the video quite long, and I would need to change my lyre, and I just honestly don't want to do that. I don't want to change them to 3 sharps and then change the sharps back and then change the 2 flats and change those back. So we're just going to start with no sharps, or we're going to stay with, no sharps and no flats, C major. I also, this is a side note, I personally like to use C major or A minor the most on this particular lyre because I have access with the range of the lyre. I have a lot of access to the notes in these scales. So for example, with C major, I have 3 C's. So I have, okay, I just tuned it. It went a little bit out of tune. And the weather's very crazy here right now. So I have 3 C's, which means I have 2 full octaves to play with in C major, which is really nice. I also have 2 full octaves in the relative minor because I have access to, again, 3 A's. And I really like that. That's one thing that I use to choose which key I play in with the lyre is which keys do I have full range, 2 octaves, full range in both the major and the relative minor, because I switch back and forth between those 2 a lot. Sometimes because of other reasons, maybe I want to try something a little bit different, or maybe like I'm playing with another instrument that's set in a particular key, I don't go by that rule, but usually I do because I like to have that full access there. Okay, so let's back up for a moment. So we're in C, and I've already shown you that we can play in C major, of course. We can play in A minor. And if we're looking at the circle of fifths, I want to show you how I got to A minor. We see C major at the top, and then it's a capital letter, which is usually how major chords are indicated. Those letters are capitalized. And then we have the A on the interior of the circle, and it is lowercase. And that is usually how minor chords, or minor keys or minor scales are indicated. So that is what's called, again, the relative minor key. Now I illustrated this before, but let me do this again. I did it in another video. But so I've shown you what it sounds like when we play in C major and then in A minor separately, but let's put it together. So already we can see that being able to switch between C major and A minor adds a lot to the music, adds a lot of just richness to the music. I think that's probably the best word for it. And what I'm doing here, I'm trying to keep it very simple. All I'm doing, just so you can maybe copy this a little bit, is with my right hand, I'm mostly staying on the first, the third, the fifth, and the 8th note of this scale. So in C major, that's C, E, G, and then just C at the top. Sometimes I'm going to the second note, which is D, as a way to sort of pass through and go back up or back down to the first or the third note. But this is what's just called the primary chord, the one chord. And so I'm just staying within there because that's it's very illustrative of C major in and of itself. So that's the right hand. In the left hand, if I'm playing in my C major right now, I'm just staying on those same notes, the 1, the 3, and the 5, the first, third, and fifth note of the scale. So C, E, G, to really outline and highlight that I'm in C major right now. I want the listener to hear that. So again, so I mixed in at the very end a little bit of F, and then traveling back down, also the D. But the left hand, I just stayed on that 1, 3, 5. So I'm adding a little bit to what I have here in the book to tell you not just what keys you can play in, but a little bit of what notes to help you out as well. So if you're just starting, that's a good way to start, the 1, 3, 5, first, third, and fifth note of that particular scale. I did the same thing in the A minor, the 1, 3, 5. So this will be A, C, and E now. Now I did all of that on the 1, 3, 5, and 8, except for the very end where I did a B. But the left hand again, 1, 3, 5. That's how I'm going to keep it, the 1, 3, 5, to illustrate this concept, and also to give you a simple starting place if you're trying to write something or just work on that composition or improvisation skill. So try that, going from the C to the A, back up to the C. Okay, so even with that, we have a lot of richness, but we still have 4 more keys that we can at least dabble in, and that's putting it lightly. So we have C and A. The next thing that you can do to find our second major key, we have 1 major key and 1 minor key. I told you we'll have 3 of each of those. So the second major key that we can have is G major. Now, how do we know this? How do we find this out? There's sort of 2 different ways we can do that. The most simple way is to look at our circle of fifths and starting with whatever key we're in C, and go to the right, just sort of 1 notch, right? And for this particular example, it will be G major. Now, if I was in A major, the next one to the right, or clockwise, I should say, going clockwise, is E. If I was in B flat, going clockwise, it would be F. Okay? And so we're just going kind of one movement over. Now what this does in our example is it goes to a key where there's just 1 sharp. And what this means concretely is that C major, if I were to play the C major scale, and then I were to play the G major scale, all of the notes except 1 note are going to be exactly the same. Now with C major, I'll start on C, and my 1, 3, 5 will be C, E, G, whereas in G major scale, it will be, G, B, D. So where I start and what my primary chord is, that's different, but there's nothing on the lyre that I have to change in order to move into the G major scale. The exception is the F sharp, because that's the 1 sharp that we add in G major. And so if I'm wanting to play in G major while my instrument is set to C major, I need to avoid that F sharp. Now, you can play around with this. Sometimes having that F sharp in there when you're in the G actually sounds kind of nice, but we're not going to go into that territory right now. We're going to try and keep it really simple. Excuse me. Okay, and so on my lyre, the G is a little bit high for me to start and go up, so I'm going to go down because I have access also to 2 octaves, full octaves in on this particular lyre in G because I have 1, 2, 3 Gs. Okay, so here's me playing in G. Let me do that again. I accidentally grabbed that F there. So that's G major. Now, since we've now added another key, let's add that in. We have C, A, and G. So let's see how these kind of can go together. That's A, here's G. Back up to A. C. That was A, here's G. C. And hopefully you could hear it's getting richer and richer every time, which is really awesome and beautiful. And as with the C and the A, with the G, with this example, I'm just playing with the 1, 3, 5. So let's actually do the 1, 3, 5, 8 for each of these so you can hear it. This is C, A minor, G major, and then let's go back to C. So that is really nice to hear. Okay, so that's now our second major key. The next key, or the fourth key that we can now add our second minor key. And the way we do this is the same way actually that we just did it with the C major. We're at G, which is on the outside of the circle. That's has an uppercase letter. Now let's look on the inside of the circle in relation to G. What's the relative minor key of G? Because if G major was really close to C major, then E minor is going to be really close to A minor, because C and A share the same key signature, no sharps and no flats, and G major and E minor share the same key signature, 1 sharp, F sharp. So E is going to be our minor key. Now this one is a little bit harder to get to on this particular lyre because I don't have an E down here. So I only have 2 E's that I have access to, but you can at least hear the 1, 3, 5. And I played an F there. I keep doing that by accident, I apologize. It sounds like an accidental, so it actually can sound nice in the right context, but let's stay away from that for the time being. So that is really nice to have. We now have a second minor key. So let's do what we've been doing. Let's travel between these different keys. C major, E minor, back to C, A minor, G major, back to C, okay, so we've got lots of options now. We've got 4 different options of places that we can go and play around with. What helps to complement this is moving that left hand. That really kind of shifts and sets the foundation of what key is it that we're playing in. If I don't shift my left hand, it's either going to sound wrong, or it's not going to complement the right hand, and it's not going to sort of, you could say, almost sort of trigger a transition in the listener's ear, because you're telling the listener we're playing in C major with that bass in the left hand. Okay, so shifting that left hand is really, really important. Okay, let's now go to sort of our third major and our third minor key here. All right, so before we shifted clockwise, now we want to shift counterclockwise. So we're starting at C major again. This is our home base. Shifting counterclockwise, we now go to F major. Now F major, just like G major, has all the same notes as C major, except the B flat. And so the B is what we would kind of want to avoid for this one. And so with this 19 string lyre, I have access to, again, 2 full octaves for the F. So here's my 3 major keys: C, G, and F. And I can go back up to G, and then A. Sorry, C. And you hear how they sort of tell the story, just those 3 major keys. Excuse me. This is one reason why sometimes you might think, well, gosh, what's the difference between like a 16 string lyre and a 19 string? Like, it's only 3 extra strings. Does it make that big of a difference? In a certain sense, no. There's a lot that you can do with 16 string for sure. And in another sense, it absolutely makes a huge difference. One of the reasons is what I've just illustrated. So with a 16 string, at least the particular one I had, I didn't have this bottom F. And so it limited me a lot from being able to use this key, because I didn't have access to 2 full octaves. In the same way, on the 16 string, I didn't have the top B and C, and so I couldn't play a full 2 octaves on C major. Okay, and so having access to multiple keys within one key signature makes a big difference if you've got an extra 2 strings, an extra 3 strings, whatever that difference may be. So that's a little bit of a side note. Okay, so we have now our full major keys: C major, G major, and F major. Now, just like we've done before with F major, we're going to see, well, what's the relative minor for F? We go on the inside of the circle, and we see, oh, it's D. All right. Now D, just like with E minor, D minor, I don't have 2 full octaves, but I have very close. I have one short. So here's my D. This is one of my favorite minor keys that you can access here. So let's look at our minor keys. So we have A minor, we have E minor, and we have D minor. And let's go back to A. Okay, so really, really nice there. So now, I don't know if I could, well, I guess I could travel through all of them. Let's see if we can do this. We're a little bit of a challenge. All right, so see if we can travel through all 6 of them. And then I'm going to pause here and I'm going to point out kind of the lay of the land a little bit on the lyre itself. This is a different way of sort of figuring out and understanding how I can access all of these keys. All right, so let's just, for some fun. I don't know if I'll get here, or maybe some of it's going to sound a little weird, but we'll get to it. Let's actually start on the A minor. There's 3 of them. Hey, I think we did it. Nice. All right, that was fun. So that's a nice little challenge, actually, is see if you can travel through all 6 of these. You can go back. It'll sound more musical to go back to some of them sometimes. But certainly, here's a few kind of shortcuts. So if you're in the relative minor of the one that you're in, so I'm tuned to C major. The relative minor is A minor. And I do this a lot in pieces. We have A, we're in the minor, then shifting down one note brings us into one of the major ones, G major. Shifting down one more brings us into the other major, F. Then go back up to G. And then A. So those 3 go well together. The other 3, the C major, which is our 3rd major, and then D minor and E minor, those go well together. So we start in C. You really want to start in whatever you're set in, either the major or the minor. So C or A are really our starting points, and they need to be. Otherwise, we're going to end up just totally staying away from our certain strings, and you're sort of wasting that string. So don't do that. Okay, so here's... That was a D. Just playing around with D and C. Now we're going to go up to E. Down to D. So, A minor, G major, and F major go well together. C major, D minor, and E minor go well together. And you could sort of create a piece where you have one section in one of those, and then your next section is in the second grouping, and then you go back to that original grouping. So that's just an idea of how to play with it. Okay, let's take a break, and I want to come back and show you a few more things, make a few more comments about this. Study the graph. If you've got a piano, you could also try this on a piano. It would allow you to try multiple keys without having to change the tuning on your lyre. But make sure you understand this before we go to the next section, and then certainly for the practice. So let's pause for a moment, and we'll come back in just a moment. Okay, I've zoomed in now because I want to show you how to figure this out in a slightly different way if you desire. So this is going to be, in a certain sense, the same content that I just covered, except we're not going to be using the circle of fifths. We're going to be using our lyre itself to figure out what are the different keys that I can play in. So this alternative is good for those who maybe appreciate this visual way of learning. Or if you don't have the circle of fifths and you're not quite sure, you don't have it memorized, what key has 1 sharp, what key has 2 sharps, that sort of thing. Okay, so you do need to know what key that you're set in. So I need to know that if I have no sharps and no flats, this is C major, and that the relative minor is A minor. But even if I just know it's C major, that is my starting point. You've got to know that. Okay, so here's my C. To figure out the relative minor, maybe I don't know that A minor is the relative minor. All I need to do, and this is true in every key, I start with what's called my tonic note, which is C, and count down 2 strings. 1, 2. This is A. This will always be your relative minor. So say I was in, let me see if I can do this on, well, let's actually just go with our examples. So we have C and A, so they should have just 1 string in between the 2. One of our other major keys is G major. So we're at G right here. Same thing. If I don't know the relative minor right off the top of my head, I count 2 strings down. So I've got F and then E. E is the relative minor of G. Again, I've got 1 string in between. Okay? So C and A, G and E. And then the other major key that I have is F. Now I also have an F down here, but I chose this one up here because I can go downwards. So I have F and then go down 2 strings. 1, 2, D, D minor. It's always going to be down. It's not going to be going up. Okay? And so that already gives me my 6 keys. C, A, G, E, F, D. Okay? So that is how we can find our relative minor for any of the major keys. Now, it sort of poses the question, well, what if I can't remember what the other major keys are that I can use? Well, the way to do this, again, in every key, you got to know you're in C. And then the 2 additional major keys that you can use are going to be what's called your 4th and your 5th. It'll be the 4th note of that major scale and the 5th note. So I have C, that's my first note. Then I have D as my second note. E as my third. And F as my 4th. So my 4th, F, and my 5th, G, are going to be major. Okay? And again, if I was in a different key, say I was in, for example, just D, I would count up, I'm not going to play them because it's not going to sound right, but if I was in D, then I would know that I can also use G and A as my major chords. Okay? So that's one way to find all of your major keys, and then your minor keys are you could even do it this way. If I have all my major keys and then I go down 2 strings, if I've got all 3 of these and I go 1, 2, here's my minor strings. Okay? So hopefully that helps to sort of condense it a little bit rather than having to go through the chart every time. We start on C. I know I've got my 4th and 5th. Great. There's my major keys. Then I go down 2 strings, 1, 2. I can double check this. I should have my bottom one on the relative minor of whatever key I'm set in. So for this example, A. And then my 4th and 5th of that scale too. That's my other 3 keys I can play in. All right. The last thing I want to point out is simply the fact that we have now access to we can play on any note, starting on any note in this scale except for one. The only one that this doesn't fall into is B, and this is a B diminished chord. Now you could work in this, but it does, as you can probably hear, it has that kind of spooky sound to it, so it doesn't fit in every song, but you can certainly utilize it. But it's not a normal major or normal minor key. It doesn't have those whole and half steps in the way that we have talked about before. So that's the only exception. And for every key, so if I know in this one I'm in C major, this diminished is sort of a key that doesn't fall into the category. It's always going to be the key of the string 1 note down. So in this case, we're in C, we go down to B. This is the one that's going to be the diminished, the kind of spooky one. Okay? Everything else we can use. So let's go through this scale really quick, and then we'll close it before we go into practice. So we're in C major. We can use C major. We know that. D. Can we use D? Yes, that's our minor. That's one of our minors. Okay, let's go up to the next one. E. Can I use E? Yes, that's one of our minors. Go up to the next one. F. Can I use F? Yes, that's one of our majors. Go up to the next one. G. I should have started down here. G. Can I use that one? Yes. I'll come like, well, let's just stick with this. Imagine the D up here. Can I use that? Yes. That's one of our majors. And then we go up one more. A. Can we use that? Well, yeah, that's our relative minor. And then our last one is the kind of odd man out. That B we cannot really use. Let me illustrate that more clearly a little bit down here. So we have C major. The next one up is one of our minors. The next one up is another minor. The next one up, F, is one of our majors. Next one up is our last major. And the last one up is our last minor. Okay, so just to illustrate that, we can now shift our left hand and have our sort of primary note in that little section of the piece on any key except for that B. Sorry, that's not a B, or this B right here in it. And so if you've, for example, looked at maybe some of the music that I've done and you're like, how can she move all over the place and it still sound good? It's because I know what key I'm playing in. And I know sort of what are the primary chords of that. I know what notes are transitionary notes in that particular key, in that particular scale. And I also know what key I'm set in. So always returning back to either C or A minor. Okay. All right, so I just wanted to offer that as well as another way of thinking about and understanding how we've now just sort of like exploded our capacity to play on a diatonic instrument. Okay, we're going to pause now, and I want to go to the practice and just show you how that kind of works. Okay, I've decided to stay zoomed in for this this part. I think it'll work a little bit better. We're on page 80 now, and mostly I just want you to understand how these symbols actually work because we haven't really seen this before. There's 3 different exercises. Now I'm only going to do the first one because it's the only one I'm set to. So just notice that each exercise has its own key, and so if you're going to do those, make sure you set your lyre in that particular key with the appropriate sharps or appropriate flats. The other thing you need to take note of is what is the time signature that we're in. The first one is 4/4, the second one is 3/4, and the last one is 6/8. Now the slashes in each of those measures is to it's corresponding to the time signature, and it helps you to understand the primary beats. So for example, in 4/4, you can see there's 4 plain slashes here. A slash like that indicates a quarter note in 4/4 time, and so we have 4 major beats that we play in with 4/4 time. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So the slashes are just in regards to rhythm. They don't tell you anything about what notes to play. To help you understand this a little bit more, the example in 3/4 time, it looks exactly the same as 4/4 time, except since we're in 3/4 time, we only have 3 slashes in there because we only have 3 quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The last example, 6/8 time, now it doesn't have 6 slashes in it because the way that 6/8 time is felt, or the emphasis in 6/8 time, is rather in 2 strong beats rather than in 6 equally strong beats. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And there's a dot because those slash dots represent a dotted quarter note. Okay, so that's the slashes. Then we see above certain measures, major or minor keys listed. This is to help do 2 things. 1, give you practice switching between the different keys. And also I've arranged it so that hopefully it will also give you an idea of maybe a certain combination of how they can work, and show you, oh, okay, well that's a nice sound, or that's the sound I've been going for, but I didn't know quite how to do that. So of course it's just, it's just one example in each key, so it's not very much, but at least a little bit to get you going. So for example, in the first exercise with C major, we have 2 measures of this. So I'll count myself off. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have to stay, for this exercise, you have to stay in C major for those 2 measures. Then you switch down into A minor for 2 measures. So let's do those 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So let's see if I can do that whole exercise and do it as is actually written. If you see, for example, on the second line towards the right-hand side, we have D minor, G major, A minor. They're right after each other, so they only get one measure per key. So let's see if we can put this into practice. Here we go. Okay, I didn't quite get it on the first round. I ran out of space as I went up. So let's try this again. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1. Okay, I went one measure too long on the C major, but that's all right. I need a little bit more space. Okay. So hopefully that's a good example, and just that these help you move between them. If you don't want to go that fast, don't go that fast. So I mean, it was a kind of a medium speed, but we could do even something slower, like 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Basically, don't be afraid to be simple, and you can even just practice doing half notes or something like that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Switch. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. Oops. 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay. Let me adjust the camera real quick, and then we'll have some concluding thoughts. Alrighty, so I hope that really helps to just expand your space of exploration on the lyre. Again, I know that the lyre could be an easy instrument for somebody to look at and be like, that's really limited. How could I, really play all that much on there? And just hopefully can help to show you that there's a lot that we can do within this space, and I think it's very fun to be creative in that limitation. It's one of the reasons I like the instrument so much and enjoy playing around with it. With each of these exercises, do it multiple times, and just practice going between the different keys like it illustrated at the end. And again, make it really simple. Then you'll naturally, as you kind of get maybe more bold or more creative or more sure of yourself and just better at moving between the keys, you'll be able to add, more decorative notes and more complicated things in there. But stick with the exercise in and of itself, and I think you might be surprised at how there can be something very beautiful that emerges just from moving from one position to the other. So hopefully you can also see, this is sort of my last comment, hopefully you can also see how all that we have been doing leading up to here kind of comes together in this particular lesson, I would say, or this particular chapter. So, for example, being able to move our hands to different places. Well, that's all of our placement exercises. Being able to do different things with each hand, that's our two-handed exercises. That's all from part 1. Excuse me. And if we're sure in that, then it gives us more freedom to really play on the instrument and to have the mental capacity to think about something else besides just, is my hand in the right position, which is something really valuable. Then the part 2 section that we can see in here is, of course, all the theory, whether that be knowing what time signature we're in, how to emphasize those beats, and then also understanding how a scale is comprised and how a key signature is comprised, and that opens up space for us to understand the different ways that we can dabble in many, many different keys, even though we can't change anything on the lyre as we're playing. So I think that's really beautiful and is something very fun to recognize that a lot of your work from all throughout this course, because we're really reaching the end of it, is kind of coming together to allow for you to explore and to create beauty in a particular way in this lesson. So anyways, I hope you enjoy it. Of course, let me know if you have any questions or if I can be of additional help to you. Hopefully soon I'll get the next video out, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you again, and may God bless you. May the peace of Christ be with you.